So a negative externality creates a problem. It creates a problem of market failure. We've got too much produced. We have too many people playing boom boxes. We have too many businesses polluting. We have too many people using noisy gas leaf blowers. We've got too much of the thing produced. We've got too many people driving drunk, creating these things that create a negative externality. There's too much of it happening from society's point of view. So is there something we can do to fix it? Is there something we can do to change the situation? Is there some way to fix the problem? And the answer is yes, there is. Now remember, the negative externality problem occurs because the social cost is greater than the private cost. And the result is that the private market produces too much. We want to be here at Q star, but the private market is actually producing Q0. So what we need is some way to get the private market to produce less. We need some way to reduce production. And again, remember the problem. The problem is that the business or the person undertaking this action is not bearing all of the costs to society. The social cost is greater than the private cost. And that suggests the solution. The general solution is that we want to somehow make this private cost be equal to the social cost. Make the business or make the person take into account the costs that it or they impose on other people. So we really want to have this shifted over so that it becomes this. So that's our general solution to the problem. How do we fix the problem? We want to make the private cost equal to the social cost. Because then the person who's undertaking the action, who's producing, is going to pay attention to all of the right costs, and we'll get the right amount of output produced. So how do we do that? How do we make the private cost be equal to the social cost? And so we need an incentive. As we know from day one, we need the right kind of incentive to make the producer take into account all of the costs. And a good incentive is always money. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a tax on this producer. We're going to put a tax on the producer that is creating a negative externality. Right? Now, the tax is going to be the difference between the private cost and the social cost. So we're going to put that much tax on the producer. And by putting that much tax on the producer, they'll have to pay the tax, and so that will become part of their costs. So that becomes part of their private costs. And so a tax is what we're going to wind up doing as a solution. On something that creates a negative externality, we're going to impose a tax. And the tax is going to be whatever it is, the difference between the private and the social costs. So we'll impose a tax to make the private cost equal to the social cost. And so if the social cost is a lot bigger than the private cost, we would have a big tax. If the social cost is only a little bit bigger than the private cost, then we won't have as big a tax. But we're going to impose a tax on the producer, and that will make the producer then act as if this was their cost. We're going to shift the private cost so that it becomes equal to the social cost. And what happens then? This goes away, this goes away, and now this becomes the private cost is equal to the social cost. And now the producer, paying attention to its cost, including the tax, will now produce the quantity Q0 that is the right amount for society. So The solution to a negative externality is to impose a tax, to make the private cost be equal to the social cost. And by doing that, we're going to reduce the producer's incentive to produce. The producer will produce less, and if we get it right, we'll get the producer to produce, in fact, exactly the right amount that we want for society as a whole. So, the solution to the negative externality problem: impose a tax on the producer, and that tax should be equal to the difference between the private cost and the social cost of production.